All right, we're gonna move on to the independent practice. For the independent practice, I provided a file right here, Systematic Africa IP. You can open this file, and that should give you the independent practice documents. Again, if you have access to a printer, I recommend that you print them. That way, you can just write your responses. If you don't have access to that, you can simply download the file and then just type your responses. I know there's lines, it might make it difficult. So, for example, going to this document. Um, you might have to delete this because if you type, it's gonna just push everything down and it's gonna get you all scattered and whatnot. So again, this is where you're gonna be holding yourself accountable for our independent practice. I will be, if you have any questions, please, you can take pictures. I have students through your mind sending me pictures, showing me the responses, or simply submitting the work or asking me, sir, like, I don't understand this question. Please feel free to do that, okay? So again, if you have a printer, print them out and write your responses. If you don't, you can simply download the file, type your answers. If you're a high performing student and you know deep inside if you are, you can, what I recommend, I want you to complete this independent practice on your own. I'm sure that I don't want you to be pausing, press and play on the video. If you know that you can go through this on your own, and then you can play the video and then refer back to what I just lectured on. Okay, so if for the rest of you, what I'm gonna be doing right now for the next part of the lesson is I'm gonna go through the independent practice. I'm gonna read the question, and I'll be simply explaining the answers. Okay, so you can do this in intervals, so you can just press play. Like for example, I'm gonna go through this first part. There's 3 questions. I'm sorry, 4 questions. Um, and as I go through this part, I'm gonna give you guys about. I'm gonna say like, hey, first part, first question, answer it, and then I'll explain what the answer is. Second question, what the question is, and the answer. So you can refer back and you can check yourself. Okay. All right. So again, if you can work this on your own, feel free to do that on your own right now. If not, again, I'm gonna be pacing, doing this in intervals, 1 page at a time. I also provided the PowerPoint presentation. Let me just open it from my files that I have here. So I also provided that in a PowerPoint. This is, again, I was gonna be lecturing due to our situation, but I was gonna be simply providing a picture like this, so that way we can go over. So if you're wondering what about this part of the lesson, it's the same thing, just a little bit expanded, so that way when I lecture, I can explain it to all of you. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna start off the independent practice, and again, if you want to work on your own already, you may, and just resume the video afterwards. Okay. All right. First part. Gross domestic product per capita. Take a few seconds. GDP. A country that is developing has a high or low GDP. The answer should be what? Low GDP. Okay. So this is one of the factors. And if you look, okay, at this map of the world, okay, and you should have an idea of why we're for Unit 5. Okay. Which continent do you see the lowest GDP? And your answer should be what? Africa. If you look at Africa, notice that the key, they have the least amount of GDP. Okay. So what's the main idea of this map? Okay, take a few seconds, press pause, press play once you have your answer. All right, so the main idea of this map is telling us the GDP per capita for the countries around the world. Okay. The second question is asking, what does gross domestic per capita mean? Again, press pause, play whenever you're ready. GDP per capita means how much money per average does an individual make. Okay. Next question, looking at Africa, what is their GDP on average? Okay, on average. In other words, what color from the legend stands out the most? Again, press pause, play when you're ready, write your responses. So on average, if you look, you see the most color that stands out the most is red. So on average, it's about 2,184 per capita per individual. Okay, so is that a good thing or a bad thing for Africa? It's actually a bad thing. And the last question, what does it mean? In other words, what the economy of the country is based on the information above. So just by that, we can make the inference that Africa overall has a struggling economic system that they have. Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to the next part of the questions that we have here. So you have this one, Sub-Saharan Africa per GDP per capita. This one, same thing. First question: what is the main idea of this map? Again, press pause, play. Okay, so press pause, write your answers, and then press play whenever you're ready. What is the main idea of this map? All right, so the main idea of this map is Sub-Saharan Africa GDP per capita. This is a in more depth look at Africa about its GDP. Okay, where do you find the highest and lowest GDP for Sub-Saharan Africa? Now, if you remember, we talked about this earlier. Sub-Sahara, sub, the prefix means what? Above or below? It means below. So that means below the Sahara Desert. Sahara Desert is right here. This means above, below. What is the GDP of Africa below the Sahara Desert? Okay. All right, next question. Most of the countries in Africa have what kind of GDP per capita? Okay, so do they have a high, medium, low, very low, or no data? Again, press pause, write your answers, and then press play. All right, your answer should be what? It should be low. Notice that you see this color right here. Low right here correlated to the key right here. And I know maybe you'll make the misconception thinking that, oh, okay, so red means usually it's a bad indicator, but in this case, it's actually a good indicator to have a high GDP. This will be South Africa. We'll be focused on this country a lot for this unit. All right, next question. Looking at the list of countries in Africa, where do we find the highest GDP per capita and the lowest GDP per capita? So I just kind of gave you the answer already. So take a few seconds to answer this question. Where do you find the highest and where do you find the lowest? Okay. All right. Your high should be again in the southern part of the Africa. Your very low should be in these regions. Okay. And right here we have the location of a country that we discussed before. You read about this book, and you should know what country I'm referring to. Okay, take a few seconds. What country am I referring to? And that should be what? Sudan. Okay, so in Sudan we had a long walk to water. That was where we had the water crisis for the people of living there. All right. Why is there a huge GDP gap between the high and the low? Okay, why do you think there's a high GDP gap between the high and the low? All right, so this one's a preview question. This one's going to be leading up to we're going to be looking at the history about colonization. So basically, it's just due to the exploitation of a lot of countries that you have in Africa from European colonization. That's one of the main reasons why those parts have a higher or low GDP depending on where they're at. All right, we're going to move on to the next part. So this one, first question, what is the main idea of this map above? Press pause, and then write your answers, and then press play whenever you're ready. All right, so the main idea of this map is giving us, of this pictures right here, is the HDI of Sub-Sahara, okay? So this map right here gives us the HDI of Sub-Sahara. All right, so you can question, what does HDI mean? Okay, take a few seconds to answer this question, press pause, then press play when you're ready. All right, so HDI stands for Human Development Index. What does that mean? Remember, what are the 3 indicators that we use to measure HDI? We talked about this in Unit 3. Take a few seconds again to think about that. All right, the 3 things that we use to measure HDI is, one is literacy rates, life expectancy, and GDP. All right, so now what does it look like or analyze? So again, if you look at the key, high HDI is represented by blue. Very low is in this very yellowish greenish color. So where do you find the highest HDI? That will be South Africa right here in the southern part. Okay, and then the low HDI will be in the central north part of Africa. All right, the next part, we have another map. Okay, this is from The Economist. Based on the map above, Sub-Sahara, remember, sub means what? It means below. Sub-Saharan Africa is considered a developed or developing nation. Okay, and that should be my mistake, by region. So looking at the key, comparing and contrast the different continents with Africa to support your answer. Okay, again, press pause and press play when you're ready. All right, so Sub-Saharan Africa will be considered a developing region. Okay, if you notice right here, 5.8, this color, we've talked about how Africa is a struggling continent. And if you see over here, Western Europe, it's developed, and especially the United States. Okay, the next part, economic activity in Africa. So what's the main idea of this map above? Take a few seconds, again, press pause, press play when you're ready. All right, so this one is giving us the economic activity. That means like what kind of jobs would you find typically in Africa the most? Okay. Next question is asking areas with commercial agriculture provide what kind of major resources? Okay. If they provide agriculture, commercial agriculture, what kind of resources would they produce? So again, press pause, press play when you're ready. So commercial agriculture provide things such as crops. Okay, it could be anything such as grains. It could be wheat and so on. So this is basically what commercial agriculture provides. Next question: what's the main economic activity for the countries in South Africa? Now, this is asking about specifically South Africa. What kind of economic activities? What kind of jobs? Again, press pause, press play when you're ready. All right, so if you look at South Africa right here, and then if you look at the symbols that you see the most prevalent there, this coordinates with this one, it just means other minerals. That's what you'll find in South Africa. Okay, the last one. Okay, what's the main idea of this map above? Press pause and then write your answers and then press play when you're ready. All right, so the main idea of this map right here is simply the literacy rates of the continent of Africa. Okay. So how do we know this? Again, if you look at the first thing I told you, remember in Unit 1, when you have a maps, you look at the first thing is the title. This means literacy, we see Africa. And then you have your key. This color represents about the highest level of literacy, and then it goes to medium, and then to low, and not available. Okay, that will take us to the next part of the questions. Look at the first map with GDP. What is the GDP for the countries in the South? So if you go back to the very first map, okay, GDP for the South. Okay, what's the GDP? Take a few seconds. So the GDP of the South, if you look, it's ranging right here. Okay, it's not the best or the worst. It's in the middle. Okay, and what is the GDP for the countries in the South? It's medium. Okay, this is very important because now this is going to take us to the last question. What is the main literacy rate for the countries in the South of Africa? Is there a correlation for the southern part of Africa in terms of AGI factors? So if you look at Africa's GDP in the South, this is basically one of the highest GDPs you'll have in Africa. And compared to, if you just look at, if you can eliminate all continents and just have Africa itself, South Africa will have the highest GDP, one of the highest GDPs in Africa. Now that it has a high GDP, we can see how that correlates over here, the literacy rates. Okay, how is that a correlation? Take a few seconds to answer the last question with that. Press pause and then press play when you're ready. Okay, so having a high GDP means that there's going to be high literacy rates. And if you look at the southern part of Africa, they have a high literacy rates, and again, they also have high GDP. And it goes back to what we discussed before. Countries with a high HDI have high. What are the three things that we measure? GDP, life expectancy, and literacy rates. So right here we can see that it has a high literacy rate. We already know that it has a high GDP. That means that in South Africa you'll find high life expectancy. All right, so now that concludes our independent practice. What I need you guys to do is you're going to be transitioning to the exit ticket. The exit ticket will be located right here. So you go to Teams. Okay, you're going to go to General, and you're going to go to Assignments. And I know yesterday we've been having trouble